Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. I imagine people will continue to trickle in, but I'm
Okay.
so pleased that everyone could join us today. I'm pleased that Laura is willing to provide this webinar, a very timely topic. I know I love to garden. I also have physical limitations, chronic knee and lower back pain, which makes gardening problematic many times. So I'm eager to hear what Laura has to say. Just to give you a little background, you may have already read this about Laura, but Laura is the Disability Services Coordinator for Ohio Agribility at Ohio State University Extension. She's a two-time Ohio State University alum with degrees in English and Rehabilitation Services. She presents workshops on gardening with arthritis, farming with a disability, agritourism, and other disability-related issues for Ohio Agribility and OSU Extension. She grew up in Sunbury, Ohio, was active in 4-H in Delaware County, and occasionally worked with her dad and brother in Cherry Hill Aquatics, the family water lily nursery. Laura also is affiliated with my office, I found out, is actually part of the office that I work in. So I'm Leo Taylor. I am the Program Director for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I should have probably introduced myself first. But for the College of Food, Agricultural, and Environmental Sciences. As a part of my role, I put on programming. I give my own workshops, but also host other workshops and programs that other people put on. And this is the first of several that I hope to have Laura do. Right now, all of the programming has gone online. Usually I do in-person workshops, and someday those will resume again. But just so you know, we are recording this session, and although you are all muted, your mics and your video, I welcome your questions, your comments in the chat box. I will be moderating that. There's also direct Q&A I've seen. I did not know that that was a thing, but I've received 2 questions. Bear with me, I am still learning how to utilize Zoom as a webinar tool, not just a meeting tool. And yeah, I think that's it for housekeeping. Having said all of that, I would like to turn it over to Laura. Laura, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leo. My name is Laura Ackerman. I am the Disability Services Coordinator with Ohio Agribility and OSU Extension. And I have to do a little program promotion. Tomorrow, April 10th, we have 3 webinars. It's part of the OSU Extension Ag Madness. Started out as March Madness. We were told we were not allowed to call it that. So Ag Madness, they've been having 3 webinars a day for I think this is the 3rd or 4th week. So it's really, really interesting. On the website here, on the page, I have our titles tomorrow at 9 a.m. My supervisor, Dee Jepson, and I are presenting Making Your Events, Festivals, and Agritourism Accessible to the Public. At noon, my colleague Rachel Jarman and I are presenting Assistive Technology to Keep You Farming. And at 3 p.m., I'm doing some of the same things I'm doing today and some different things. Farming and gardening with arthritis and other physical limitations. On the page there, I have the website, go.osu/agmadness. When you go in, you select the full bracket link and it shows you everything. So I hope you can join us for at least one of those tomorrow. Okay.
I forgot to mention one more thing, that after the webinar, I will be sending out a survey, a feedback survey. I really hope that you will take just a couple of minutes to provide us with feedback. I know that Laura would appreciate any comments that you might like to pass on. We're constantly striving to improve programming. It'll also be an opportunity for you to ask additional questions that might not have been answered, as well as provide comments on any other programming that you would like to see come out of our office.
I just want to make sure, can everybody see the second slide? It has a big Ohio Agribility logo at the top. I hope.
I can see it.
Okay, good. I see that. I wish I knew how to turn off the chat because it's a little distracting. But so just to give you a quick overview of Ohio Agribility, we are part of a national network of state and regional agribility projects. Our funding is based on the U.S. Farm Bill and is competitively awarded every 4 years. We are in the 3rd year of our grant cycle, so starting this summer, early fall will be our 4th year. And it's awarded to a state team, which is a land-grant university and a nonprofit. And in Ohio, that is the Ohio State University, and we work with Easter Seals of Greater Cincinnati. They're wonderful partners. Ohio AgriBility's mission is to promote success in agriculture for Ohio farmers and farm families who are coping with a disability or long-term health conditions. And I'll just describe a few of the pictures. On my far left is a man in a stand-up wheelchair, and he's working on a red tractor. His name's Jeff. He's one of our clients. Next one over, we have Bill and Harold's dog Sadie, or that might be Sarah. I don't remember. Sorry, Sarah, Sadie. They're 2 of our clients. Bill is one of our longest-term clients. He's a very good friend of ours. Next, we have a group of our peers. They were so gracious. My first year here in 2016, we had a very nice summer meeting up at Indian Lake. It was at least 150 degrees, and they still posed for some pictures for us. But it's a great time to get everybody together. And then our last picture is John. He's talking to a former colleague, Charlie. So those are just some of our clients. And you'll say, why is she describing all these things? I'm not sure who's watching. So as a disability services professional, my presentation style is to read everything and to describe everything, just so that I know everybody can, if maybe you can't see it, or you could be looking at some of these pictures as I get farther along and not even, you could see them, but you don't know what I'm showing you. So I just like to give a quick description to make sure everybody can get everything from this. Ohio AgriBility also provides education and resources to farmers, agricultural businesses and groups. We talk to healthcare, education, disability professionals, and anyone who's interested in making farming safe and accessible. Once you get to know me, you'll know that I will talk to anybody about anything, and I love to talk about disability services and Ohio AgriBility. So you're very lucky. Pictures here, we've got a nice sheep and her lamb, rather, a ewe and her lamb. Got a nice red Ohio barn with bicentennial on it, and then we have a group of chickens on the far right. So this is when I'm used to audience interaction. I apologize. I will still pretend like I can interact with you. And one of my questions, what is relaxing and enjoyable about gardening? What do you like about gardening? So what I will tell you some of the answers I've gotten in the past. It's creative, it's healing.
Well, we can get people to respond in chat if you want.
I'm sorry?
We can get people to respond in the chat box.
Oh yeah. If anybody wants to tell me what they like about gardening, go ahead.
You can take a few minutes.
Playing and watching my chickens, connecting to nature, relaxing. It's Zen-like. Lee, Gail, I would like to work with you. Zen-like gardening's fun. They like watching things grow, products at the end, safe, sanity-inducing. Very nice. Smell of the earth helps me center myself. So I'm going to say, looking over this, and please keep them coming, I love it. This is when I always ask people, who here makes a living or a good portion of their income off of their garden? Does anybody do that? I'll give you a minute to tell me in the chat, but I want to know if your income source is your garden. No. I mean, somebody may come in and say yes. I will tell you that of the probably a few thousand people at least that I've talked to by now on this topic, I've had one single person tell me that they made a living off their garden. And I said, okay, then you are exempt from me making suggestions about how you change your garden, although she still could change the way she gardened. But I asked that question as I want people to think about, we all get into that, well, that's the way we've always done it, so that's the way we do it. As we get older, I've gotten older, it's not any fun. Most days are great, some days I feel my age, but there are things I do differently than I used to do. It's the same in the garden. You can absolutely change the way you garden. If your choice is, I'm going to change the way I garden or I'm not going to garden at all, I imagine most people are going to change the way they do it. So I'll have a couple disclaimers here. I can talk very confidently about disability services, modifications. I cannot talk confidently about the specific ins and outs of gardening. So at the end of this presentation, I will give you some information, or actually there's some handouts that Leo will send out. I have some links to Master Gardener volunteers at Ohio State University. They can tell you anything you want to know about gardening. My other disclaimer is I'm not a doctor or a medical person. So if I tell you to do something and the doctor tells you the opposite, don't listen to me, listen to them. Thank you. So, but the whole point of that is there are times we can change. If we want to keep doing something we enjoy, sometimes we have to change it. And I'm going to make suggestions on changing your infrastructure or buying new tools. I recognize that most people cannot go out and buy all new tools, all new garden carts, completely redo your garden. I get that. I can't do that either. But I want you to think about it next time you're replacing a tool or you're going to make some kind of an update to your garden. Kind of think back to this to make it a little bit easier to keep gardening. Good.
Laura, someone just pointed out that we can use the hand raising feature. I did see someone raise their hand in the chat box before we began. I will keep an eye on that, and if somebody raises their hand, I'll interject and I can unmute them.
Excellent.
Oh, here we go. Somebody had just raised their hand. All right. Well, maybe they were just seeing if they could do it. All right. So yes,
Okay.
if you have a question that you would like to
Yes.
speak out loud, please raise your hand, and I will call on you.
Yes, please. So before we start gardening, we should set priorities, just like with any other big job you're going to do. And on it, I always ask, what do you have to do in the garden? If you go out into the garden and you can get one thing done, what are you going to do? And depending on the time of year, I get different answers. In the summer, when it is unbelievably hot, they all say we have to water. You have to water. Well, it's been raining like crazy here in central Ohio. That's not what I'm thinking of. But what do you have to do to the garden if you can only get one thing done? What can you put off doing? What can you not do at all? And do you need to make changes now, next year, to make working in the garden safer? We'll work through and we'll talk about tools, making things safe, things like that. But just something I want you to keep in the back of your mind. Like before, gardening should be enjoyable and relaxing. It shouldn't be painful. It shouldn't be exhausting. It's, yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
All right, Gail Zantner has their hand up. Let's see. I'm going to unmute if I can. Huh, it's not letting me. Alicia, do you know? Yeah, I was wanting to unmute so that folks could. All right, we'll work on that. Sorry. So we have
We'll figure it out.
Yep.
So before we start gardening, there are some things that we should consider. Some medications can cause interactions or sensitivity. You could, depending on any medication, I'm not naming any, there could be increased sensitivity to heat, sun, cold. You could get dehydrated. You could get tired faster. There could be decreased, and just because of a condition that you might have, perhaps diabetes. My dad had diabetes and had some neuropathy and lost some sensitivity in his extremities. So just be thinking about, if I'm out in the sun too long, am I going to get a rash? Is it going to have some kind of an adverse effect on me? You should always drink plenty of water, no matter what. Drink a lot of water. It gets hotter. We all get dehydrated. It can cause other things. And then thinking about changing the way you work. Take a break when you get tired. That seems really obvious, and a lot of the things I say today are common sense, but common sense is not always common. And take a break when you get tired. Repetitive tasks can lead to injury, so change tasks frequently. And by repetitive tasks, I mean pruning, holding your shears, using your loppers, something especially hand pruning or hand tasks, even holding the garden hose. I have a nozzle for it, and I got one recently, and I'll talk about it in a minute, that can lock in place, and I don't have to squeeze it to hold it. I just kind of rest it in my hand. Little things like that you don't notice at the time, could catch up to you. Poor posture can lead to pain, fatigues, and strains. Resting on one leg, maybe you're sitting on the ground and you're resting on one hand and working with the other one. Just keep those things in the back of your mind, that doing that, and is it going to cause long-term injury? I don't know, but if you do something all the time and all the time and all the time, those repeated insults to your body could add up. And respect pain. Our poor little guy here, we have a picture of a guy with the hoe and he's got a backache. You can tell by the look on his face. If it hurts, stop doing it. Change the way you're doing. Stop doing that. It's your body's way of telling you to stop it. Gardening is exercise, so you should stretch often. We have a nice kitty right here doing a good stretch. One of the handouts that Leo will send you after the presentation is called Don't Let the Dirt Hurt. It is from one of the Agribility projects and the Arthritis Foundation, and just has a set of exercises or stretches really that are good, that we don't necessarily think about, stretching our hands, stretching our arms, but you do use a lot of that in gardening. So a few different safety tips. If you're using equipment or a ladder or a stool or anything that you're climbing on, use 2 to 3 points of contact when dismounting equipment. So don't just hold things in your arms and just hop off the lawn tractor. That's a good way to get hurt. Install handrails to assist with getting on and off equipment safely. I have a picture here it's called the Dawn Bar. One more handout that you're gonna get a lot of handouts at the end of this. I swear it'll be worth it. You're gonna get a handout called the Garden Tools handout, and it has pictures of maybe, I wanna say a couple dozen, 18 to 2 dozen different tools, pieces of equipment. I will tell you, no one from Ohio Agribility or Ohio State gets any money for me showing you those products. I don't get money when you click it, anything. I just know that when I go home from a presentation, I'll think, what was that thing that they were talking about? That's what it's for. It's just for you to refer back to. Heck, you can take it to Oakland Nursery, which is my favorite local nursery, and say, I want one of these things, even though it's listed as coming from Amazon. So anyway, back to the picture. It's a view of a lawn tractor. There's a green floor and a yellow seat, black armrests, but it's got a bar coming up from the floor of the lawn tractor. It comes up and then it curves towards you. So it looks kind of like a cane, but the cane that would come straight up and then the handle of it would curve towards you. What that is if you're sitting and you need to stand up, you might be able to tell on those armrests, they're pretty short. So I would have to have my arms all the way back at my sides and perhaps even behind me to even use those armrests to stand up from. With that bar in front of you, you can lean forward, put your hands on it, and push or pull yourself up. I know things like that are very helpful. My dad had both of his knees replaced, and he would really liked having something like that he could push himself up off of. That's what that is. It would also be helpful if you were stepping onto that lawn tractor. There's a big cover over the blade, so you have to take a pretty broad step to get from the ground to that. You could grab a hold of that. It's called a Dawn Bar. You could grab a hold of that Dawn Bar, and it would give you some stability when you're getting on or off of it. Protecting your hearing, wear headphones or ear protection when working with loud machinery. And it doesn't take a lot of noise to cause you a little bit of damage. And I will actually put in a plug for the Ag Madness brackets. My supervisor and colleague last week did a really good presentation on ear protection and hearing protection. I learned quite a bit about decibels. Shout out to Dee and Lisa. But it was really good. It's something that I think you could help. I mean, obviously it's based at the farm, but there's plenty of noisy machinery that goes on in a garden. There's landscapers outside here right now that I can hear. So Fitness for Farm Life. This is another pitch. This is a training program. This was developed by Leah Schwinn, who even as of right now may be a doctor of occupational therapy. If not, she will be one by the end of tomorrow. And Andrew Kramer, who I believe by now is a master of public health, not even a candidate. He just defended yesterday. But they worked together with my supervisor and I and Agribility to develop a training program which is focused on developing education and skills for prevention of injury, exercise as medicine, and stretching. They developed a Train the Trainer program, which will be available summer 2020, assuming that we can all go out and mingle and get together again. I have one slide on this about safe lifting, but it's a really great program they've really done. So saying that, I'm going to talk a little bit about safe lifting. I know this is my colleague Justin. He's lifting a hay bale. Many of you may not need to lift hay bales, but I know many of you are lifting bags of soil, bags of seed, bags of mulch, heavy equipment. So no matter what you're lifting, just boxes from Amazon. I know Amazon's at my house a lot this last month. No matter what you're lifting, the mechanics and the basis of it are same. So for safe lifting, you should stand with your feet shoulder width apart, bend with your knees, and lift with your legs. And you always hear, lift with your legs, not your back. Bend down, so crouch down, lift with your legs, keep your head up and look ahead. Don't look down at what you're lifting, look in front of you. That will keep your neck from going down and possibly injuring yourself. Engage your stomach muscles and breathe out as you make the effort to lift. That also helps to stabilize your back. Lift it and hold it close to your body. Andrew, who is one of the ones who did this, his example is your dog is never heavier than when you're trying to rush outside because it's peeing. If you're puppy training a dog and you pick it up and you run and you're like, I don't want to touch it, you're running out, that's a very heavy dog. So hold things close to your body, because if you're just holding it out in front of you, you're only using the strength of your arms to your forearms. You hold it close to your body and your whole torso can help with the lift. Your nose and toes should be in line. You do not want to twist. When you set it down in front of you, don't twist and toss it. If you see Justin, he's bending his legs. He's holding the bale close to him and he's going over to the wagon, holding it close, facing the wagon and sitting it down. A lot of times, and you can try this at home, I won't do it. I usually do it when we're in person, but I stand in front of a table and I turn just my top half of my body and pick something up. Just doing that, sitting here, I can feel a little twist in my back. I'm not going to hurt myself because I'm not lifting anything, but I have heard from my very, very wise safety colleagues that a lot of times you hurt yourself during that setting it down. You could potentially hurt yourself lifting, but when you twist and set something down, that's really where the injury could come in. So think of the safe lifting when you're thinking about how to lift anything, and that's anything. It doesn't have to be a bale of hay. Protect your back. So we want you to avoid working or standing in awkward positions for long periods of time. Avoid standing for a long period of time. Try not to lock your knees. It's really easy to do, but that can put strain on your back. Wear comfortable and supportive shoes with a good tread. You should do that always, but especially if you're in the garden, if you are working or walking outside, where ground could be uneven, or on a day like that, it could be wet or muddy, but a good tread is going to give you a good foundation. Remember those safe lifting techniques that we just went over. Make more trips with smaller loads. So I am a former waitress. I believe in full hands in, full hands out. I tend to carry everything that I can up the stairs, down the stairs, out to the car. So I know better and I know I should not do that. It's a habit I try to break. But when you're overloading yourself, it's a lot easier to take a wrong step, lift something wrong, and pull something. You want to minimize carrying heavy or awkward objects. And if you can, use a cart, a wagon, or another device to carry things around. Use a seat cushion on equipment, and again, stretch. I have some pictures here. The little one on the left, the black square that says Made in the USA. It is a seat cushion. It has a, kind of like, I think it's called like a neoprene, like a kind of a thick bathing suit-ish stretchy cover. It unzips, and inside it's got inflatable egg crate cushion. You know, it's got the space that looks like an egg crate. So that's inflatable, and you can just put that on the seat of your car, the seat of your lawn tractor, the seat of your regular tractor, whatever it is. Don't underestimate a cushion seat that can really help keep your back from getting too sore, getting jostled around. It can absorb a little bit of the shock. To the right is a rolling work seat. Both of these are on the gardening handout that you will get. The nice thing about this work seat, it has a nice big thick 4 wheels. It's got a really good sturdy base. It's got big wheels, so it might get stuck in the mud, but I think it's less likely to. The seat that's on there swivels. It's a cushioned seat, and you may or may not be able to see, but it's got a backrest that's also cushioned. It's a little bit like an office chair setup. It doesn't go all the way up the back. On the outside of the back of the cushion seat are loops like a tool belt. So you could put different tools in there. It's got a little basket in the front. It's got kind of a tray basket under the seat. So it's got a lot of room for storage. I believe it has drink holders on those. So you need to put your water in there. And the thing that I think is most important about this is it has that long handle and you can push it or pull it. You can also sit on it, the seat swivels. So if you were sitting and doing something where you could be seated and working between your shoulders and say the top of your legs, doing work in there, you can sit on the chair, do that, and then if you need to move down, you just kind of crab walk, shuffle your feet over, and it will roll with you. You can use that handle as like a rudder for a boat to steer where you want to go. And the thing I really like about it, I don't know if I still have the picture of our little red work seat, but at Agribility, we bought a really cute little red work seat. It's just as cute as can be, a little red wagon seat, little thing. It doesn't have a handle to push. So the first time I was there with it at Farm Science Review, I thought, oh, I'll just take it over to the Utzinger Garden gazebo where I'm going to do a presentation, and realized I'm going to have to crouch over this thing and push it 1.5 blocks across Farm Science Review. It did not get to go because I wasn't going to do that. Plus it would hurt my back, plus being an awkward position. But if you're going to buy a work seat, get something that has a handle so that you can push it or pull it easily without having to crouch over top of it. So as I'd mentioned before, hauling your equipment and supplies is very helpful. You're also still using your back and legs, but you can haul a lot more stuff. You get a little bit more stability. Tips for choosing the right cart or wheelbarrow. Again, if this is something that you're not going to replace right now, just keep this in the back of your mind. But you want 2 or more wheels. The little picture here is of an old red wheelbarrow. It doesn't have a front wheel. It's very picturesque because it's full of dirt and full of soil and flowers and some plants. It looks a lot like the yellow wheelbarrow we had when I was growing up. It had the back legs that were just legs that came down, had a single front wheel, which was not very stable. There was more than a time or two that I had it full of horse manure and I tipped it over and then had to clean it up because it just was not well balanced. So get something with at least 2 wheels. Think about the weight of what you're going to put in that cart, of your cargo, and think about the weight of the actual cart before you do. Look for carts and wheelbarrows with removable back or front panels and large tires. I'm going to go to the next slide. So here on my left is the gray cart. It weighs 95 pounds. It does have a removable front panel and it carries up to 400 pounds. It has 2 large wheels at, I guess that would be the front. You can see that the panel at the front is a little bit taller than the sides. It would pull up. It has 2 wheels in front, 2 sturdy legs in the back, and then a big D-shaped handle, which would make it, you could either grip it with your arms, with your hands facing out to the sides, the top of your hands facing up to the sky, whatever's more comfortable with you. The nice thing about the removable panel, if you fill that with, say, mulch or soil or something, you could fill your cart with that, take it out where you want it, pull up that panel, and then just shovel it out into where you needed it. You don't have to pick it up and dump it. It's a lot easier to, once you get it in there, it's a lot easier to distribute it. One thing I will say, it weighs 95 pounds. I can't see anybody who's presenting, but who's attending, but every time I do this, there's at least a few people there that probably don't even weigh 95 pounds. So before you buy this cart, and it's a really good looking cart, I would go to the nursery or wherever it is, big box store, and try it out. Not only try it out, I'd push it up and down the aisles, and then I would go and I would find a couple bags of soil, a couple bags of mulch, whatever it is that I would really be carrying in that at home. I would put it in there and I would make sure I can still carry that around and push it and manipulate it. And if you have a hill, are you going to be able to push it up a hill or pull it down a hill? Think about how you're going to use it, and think about, so right now it's kind of heavy, but I can deal with it. This is something, I want to say it's probably $150 or $200 cart. You're not going to want to replace this in a few years. So do you think that you'd still be able to use that in 5, 10, 20 years from now? So I like to think about things like that. That's probably the kind of thing you wouldn't buy every couple of years, I hope. But think about how you're going to use it. The cart on the right is much smaller. It weighs 21 pounds. The sides fold down, carries up to 150 pounds. It's a small green cart. It reminds me of a kid's little red wagon. Has 4 pretty good sized wheels, not as big as the ones on the other cart, but still pretty good. If you look at it, I don't know how well you can see it, but it's got, it's made out of fabric that feels like a vinyl suitcase, or feels like suitcase fabric. It has pouches on the sides. And then if you can tell, there's a shovel pushed through. So you can see the shovel blade above these wheels that are at the opposite end of the handle. And you can see the shovel handle over by the wagon handle. There's a couple of plants inside. It also folds down, which to me would be very appealing because that gray cart is pretty big and would take up quite a bit of room in your garage or your storage shed. This little green one would collapse down pretty well. So it's something to think about when you're picking a cart. So equipment and supply storage. Whenever possible, store your supplies and equipment in or near the garden. If they're already out there, you don't have to haul them back and forth, and you spend more time gardening and less time preparing to garden. Use adjustable height shelves to store items. Set a shelf as the same height as your garden cart. So if you had that gray garden cart or even the little green one that I just showed you, I would set one shelf. Obviously, you can only do one shelf at the same height of that. And that is because, let's say you've gone and you bought a big bag of soil and you bring it home and you use safe lifting techniques because you're going to. You take it out of the car and then you put it on the shelf, and you've had to lift it once to move it there. But then once it's time to take it out to the garden, all you need to do is pull your cart up to it, grab that bag and pull it straight across off the shelf into the cart that it's the same height. So you're not lifting it up. Even if you're using the good lifting techniques and you're picking it up and putting it over, there's still a risk, and maybe it's more exertion than you really need to do. If you can pull something straight in, that's safer. Try to keep your shelves between knee and shoulder height. As we reach over our heads, I can feel a little bit of a strain in my shoulder right there. In our garage, the only thing we keep up high is Christmas decorations, because they go up once a year and they come down once a year. They don't get pulled down other than that. But things that are over your head, if you have to store things over your head, please make sure they're things that are very lightweight. You don't want to put something heavy up there that could potentially come down and hit you in the head or the shoulders. And keeping things up from too close to the ground, you're going to have to crouch down inevitably. If you're like me, it's going to roll to the back of the shelf. You have to go digging back for it. So try to keep things in between that knee and shoulder height so they're easier for you to access. Now on the left side, on my left side here, we have a little tan storage bench. And you can't see it's a bench, but it is. When you close that lid, it's a nice bench. A picture of it is on the gardening handout. But it's a heavy plastic. They have a lot of those this time of year. It might be called a pool bench or garden bench. It's a really sturdy plastic that's meant to be left outside. It's nice looking, holds some things, you can sit on it. We've already talked about the shelf. I have several of those in our garage, in our utility room. I love those things, adjustable shelves. And then in the center, we have a picture of an old mailbox. And when I was doing one of these presentations, someone in the audience said, my neighbor put an old mailbox in the garden and they store small things in it, small hand tools, spray bottles, etc. And I thought that was brilliant, because if you have to walk out to the mailbox and you walk back in your garden's on the way, you can stop, go in, prune some things, do a little spritzing, do a little work without having to go get your tools, come back out. And having the tools there, it's just nice. It's one less thing you have to bring. And like I said, you want to spend less time preparing to go garden and more time gardening. Protecting your fingers, hands, and wrists. We want to save your fingers and avoid repetitive use of your fingers. So pruning, or even if you have to screw things in, if you're building furniture, whatever. But anything that's that small use, it just feels like, well, it's just my hand. But think how much it hurts when you're trying to write something, you're trying to eat and hold utensils, anything like that. You want to save pain on your hands, because if you start building that pain in your hands, my grandmother had arthritis, and a lot of things that were pretty simple were really hard for her. So let's try to reduce lots of squeezing and little strains and sprains on the hands. You want to keep your wrist and hands in a neutral position instead of twisting. This hand that is pictured on the picture, that's a good neutral position. If you just think and hang your hands down to your side, they probably hang to the side like that. They might come a little bit, but a neutral position, you should have a little bit between the forearm and the thumb and hand. There's an angle there. It's not straight. Your forearm and your thumb don't naturally go straight. They have that little bend to them. This black glove that this person in the picture is holding is called a grippy glove. It has, if you can see, it goes on your hand. The palm of it has kind of it's not leather, but it's kind of a textured pleather surface. The back of the hand, if you can see, it has the loop side of hook and loop, or the soft side of Velcro. And then that flap, you can see a flap has come up, gone over the fingers, and it has the prickly side, the loop, the hook side of hook and loop. So what you do is you put the glove on, you put your tool in your hand, and you put it, and you just do a light grip. It's not like this kind of a grip where you're gripping really, really tight, like you grip a pen tight. It's just a light grip. It's a light, relaxed grip. You put the tool in your hand, you put the glove on, and you wrap it over. So if I've got a tool in my hand right here, the flap comes up, comes over, and it secures that tool in my hand. I'm not making any sort of effort right now, but I would still be having a pretty decent grip on that tool. I hope this makes sense. It's so much easier to show you in person, but it holds the tool there. And that's nice if you don't have a strong hand grip. If maybe your hands get tired or fatigued easily, if you have arthritis, if you just don't have strong grip anymore, if you don't have great if your motor skills have declined and you can't grip things well. This glove can keep it there. You do feel a little bit of tension, I guess, a little bit of work in your hand for holding it, but not like you'd feel if you were holding that tool and really keeping a hold of it. The grip lets you just kind of relax and it rests there. The glove, again, is on the garden tools handout. Use tools with spring action designed to reduce hand strain. Those, I've looked them up, but they take very little gripping and squeezing to get a really good bite. So if you had pruners, it's just a little bit of effort to squeeze them. It's not like the pruners I really have to squeeze to get a good bite out of it. It's a nice thing. The tool does the work for you. Again, I would go to my local garden store and try these things out. It's one thing to get them described, but you really need to put them in your hand and try them out. Want you to protect your elbows and shoulders. Like I'd said before, when I was reaching up, I can feel that in my neck, my shoulders. Try to minimize working with your hands above your shoulders if you have a lot of hanging plants, if you have arbors, etc. Anytime you can, if you have to reach up above, take breaks, do something else, come back. Use long-handled tools to minimize the need to reach or stoop, and stretch. Again, you need to stretch. This right here in the picture is a long-handled water wand. It would just attach to the end of your hose. Instead of having to stand up high with my arm up here, holding the nozzle to water my hanging plants, I could have my hand down in front of me and squeeze that little grip there and water the plants. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you had a lot of plants, it could really help. Also, if you had a pretty big flower bed, that water wand does not have to go up above you. You could hold it out in front of you, get a few feet into the water, into the flower bed, and water from there. So some other advantages of ergonomic tools. Look for something, if you're going to get a tool, get something that's lightweight. A good enlarged foam or soft handle is easier to grip. A telescoping handle, if you could make it shorter or longer depending on what task you're doing. And add-on grips and rubber grips. So the small picture on my left of the yellow, it's like a yellow rake handle with a black attachment to it. That's called a stout back grip saver. And you can see it has kind of a D-shaped handle, and then it has a little clamp at the end. You do attach this to the tool or to the rake or shovel. I suppose you could take it off one and put it on another, but it's pretty much meant to be put onto one single shovel, rake, piece of equipment and left there. And then you can see a picture of a woman over here. She's got her hands that I put circles on them. I want you to see that her hand, and just imagine that you're holding a rake and you straighten your arm out in front of you or off to your side. And I've got my arm straight. You can't really see it. Straight. But my arm, my forearm is straight from my shoulder down to through my thumb. And just doing that, I'm not holding anything. I'm not working. I have not been out doing any kind of strenuous. I can feel a strain at my elbow. I can feel it in my forearm and wrist down to my thumb. And then her other hand is back, depending on what handed you are. Her other hand is back and it's also kind of torqued up. But the biggest thing is that straight forearm. That's not what you want. The picture on the right, she's using the back saver grip. Her hand is in a much more natural position. She's got that good bend at the wrist into the hand. She has a back grip. She has, I'm sure, that same handle on her right, using it on her right hand. In the first picture, she's slumped over. She's really curved in the spine because she has to be in order to get down there and get enough torque to use that. Whereas the other one, she's got a much better back position. But the advantage is you're not twisting your arms and hands around and holding it. You're holding your hands in a much more natural position. I encourage those because that really does, snow shoveling or hoeing or whatever, you really feel it that day or the next day. So ergonomic tools are designed to keep the body in a neutral position. They've got large soft handles, depression on the ridge of the top of the tool, curved to fit the natural contour of your hand, keeps your wrist in a neutral position, like you can see the small picture with the yellow and green, the inset, and it's got that good hand position. But just keep it so that it feels like a natural position for you to be. You already have tools that you really like, you don't want to change them. One thing I would suggest is, I don't know, you can kind of see it here. We put black pipe insulation around these tools and then we secure it with duct tape. So a couple of years ago, I went to the Ace Hardware down the street, bought 6 feet of pipe insulation for $2.50 and cut it up in length. And then I just wrapped it with, of course, my pipe insulation's gray, so I had to use red duct tape, the scarlet and gray. Greatest color combination ever. But you secure that on there, and so those tools go from being a small hard-handled tool to a pretty big soft tool. It's easier to grip. I don't have to grip it as tightly, and it's more comfortable on my knuckles to hold that soft foam insulation than it is the hard tool. So protecting your knees and feet, try to avoid working in awkward positions or standing for long periods of time. Again, comfortable and supportive shoes. Sit down and work when you can, or plant in raised beds or vertical gardens. On the far left here, I've got a boot that has a black, it's called an Ergomat's fatigue, anti-fatigue, I've drawn a blank shoe on it, but it has the bottom of it feels like one of those, like a scrubby sponge that has, it looks like it's all coiled up and knitted like the plastic. It just goes over top of your shoe. It's very, very squishy and soft. It can help you with traction in the mud or wet. We've seen those used in dairy barns where the floors can get wet, but it keeps you from slipping. Don't underestimate the harm from slipping. In the center, we have a 5-gallon bucket and a little black lid on it. It's overflowing with green beans. You can use that to sit on it. I would caution that you make sure you keep your balance. I'm generally got pretty good balance, but I could also see leaning too forward and just falling off. But it's a nice bucket there. I've heard people say they'll take them out and sit and weed in it. When it's full of weeds, then they have to go in, have a drink, relax, take a break. On the far right, we have a raised flower bed. So it's a big wooden box and it's full of tomato plants and I can't tell what the others are, let's say basils or peppers. But it's a way that it gets it up off the ground. It's not as far down on the ground, so you can stand or lean over it. You could probably sit on the edges and work into it too. And we'll go a little bit more into raised beds and vertical gardens later. We're going to talk about universal design, which is the creation of products and environments meant to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without need for adaptation or specialization. Universal design, you probably heard of universal design for learning for students who have disabilities or learn differently. It came out of architecture. So one of the best examples I can think of is the ramp that gets people into a building. It's there for a person with a wheelchair so they can access a building, but it's also helpful to someone who's pushing a baby in a stroller, pulling a kid on a wagon, people who are delivering, you know, cases of water or any other kind of delivery. They all use that ramp. Another thing is the curb cut and the sidewalks, to where you come to the, like the corner of the intersection, there's a curb cut so that a person in a wheelchair can come down. But again, it's helpful for all sorts of people. So we look at universal design in the garden. It makes your garden more user-friendly. It can increase your efficiency and the ease of use, provides a safer place to garden because you've eliminated some barriers and thresholds and places that could cause trouble, and you can age in place in the garden. Age in place is one of the phrases you might hear a lot with universal design. It's when you adapt your environment of your home or your workplace so that you can keep working there or living there. We want that for the garden also. A lot of people really, really enjoy their garden. So obviously you all do because you're here, but try to make it as friendly as you can. We'll go into that right now. So some different tools and equipment that you can use are lever style door handles, gate handles, and water faucets. So I have 3 little pictures here. The one in the middle of is a gold water faucet. It is on the Garden Tools handout. We have, I should get a picture of our faucet because it's got the little wheel and it's probably got grass or dirt or something stuck to it. And that thing, it's, when my hands are dry and the little wheel is not dirty, it's hard to twist. But when I've been watering plants or weeding or something and my hands are wet and I've got grass on them or leaves, the thing is almost impossible to turn. So with the lever, you can move that lever. You could move it with your elbow if you needed to. You could move it with the butt of your hand or the side of your hand. That's the whole point of it. You don't have to grip it and turn it. You can just hit it with your hand, move it back and forth. Same with a door handle, if you had a gate handle. I love soaker hoses. I really love in-ground irrigation. I know those things are expensive, but if you could do it, and that was the splurge you were gonna do, that would be a great thing to do for your garden and your lawn. It would eliminate all the watering needs. You'd have time for more other things. But soaker hoses are nice, and I actually am thinking I need to go put mine in our flower beds because you can put it out there and turn it on, and it gets the soaking and work done for you. I don't think it's as good as a regular hose to water it, but it's still a pretty good option. If you have a garden gate, if you have a garden shed, try to have smooth transitions at the entrances. This can also apply into your house, but if you can try to avoid having steps, barriers, thresholds, because if you had a wheelchair or a scooter or even a walker or other mobility device, a 2 or 3 inch threshold might as well be 3 feet high for trying to get over it. And also, if you're looking up, you're not looking down, you could trip on something like that. You want wide doors and gates. I believe I want to say 36 inches is what's recommended as best practices. Then if you had a power wheelchair, you had a walker, you could probably get through that with 36 inches. Not to mention if you have a garden cart or wheelbarrow, a nice wide door or gate lets you get in and out. Stools, benches, or rolling work seats. Here's that adorable little red wagon I had talked about before. It's very cute. This is the kind of a tractor seat my dad had on his tractor. His was rusty. It has no handle to steer it with, so you basically have to crouch over it and push it. But if it's just staying in place, it's a good little seat. But if you're going to move it from here to there, try to find something that's a little more mobile. So looking into some specific things, I'm going to talk about visual impairment. And visual impairment can be fully blind, or it could be someone who's whose vision is declining, who maybe doesn't have as good a vision as you're getting closer to the dark. Unfortunately, as we get older, our vision is not what it was. So one thing for visual impairment and aging in place and universal design, you want clearly defined pathways and garden rows. So on the 2 pictures I've got here on the right-hand side, that's actually from the Buxton Inn in Granville, Ohio. They have nice pink brick paths, and they have nice dark brown beds. So the nice thing about that, it's very aesthetically pleasing, but also I can tell the difference between the dark brown bed and the light pink brick. I know which is the walkway and which is the bed, and I stay out of the bed because I don't want to walk in the bed. You want motion sensor lights in well-lit work areas. We don't, I mean, the motion sensor lights are nice for safety, security, for people coming in. If you walk out, you don't have to go and try to find the light switch. You want things well lit because there could be all sorts of things, you know, maybe an animal dug up a hole and there's a hole in the grass now, you're going to trip in it, or somebody left a tool out. But you want to be able to see what you're doing. That's always safer when you can see. You want to use bright colored or glow in the dark paint or tape on tool handles. I had mentioned before using the foam cover for the tool handles. Secure that with a bright colored tape that has a few different things. One thing is, if you don't always put things away and you leave your tools out, like the tools that I've got, they're pretty much dirt colored because they've been used often enough. If I left them in the garden bed, it would be really hard to find them. However, since I have gray pipe insulation and red tape on it, I can see them because they stand out. So if you didn't want to put the tape on, just take some bright colored tape and put a stripe around the handle and it'll pop when you can see it. You want smooth pathways between garden rows and limiting changes in elevation. So like I mentioned before, clearly defined pathways, smooth pathways. So try not to have too many lumps and bumps, try not to have steps or rises if you can avoid it. And changes in elevation. I said, next one, bank up the garden beds. So this one here that's at the Buxton Inn, it's pretty smooth, but if you don't have a fancy pink brick walkway in your garden, try to make the beds go higher so that if you were walking on this flat path and then you stepped off and you felt that it was rising, you'd know you were walking in the bed. So that would not only help you to orient yourself to where you were, if that's a concern, you could also tell, oh, I'm in the bed, I need to get out of it before I smash my plants. And last of all, you want to put in landmarks, scent, sound, touch. And this can be for, I would say, if someone was hearing impaired or deaf, if someone was visually impaired, whatever the impairment might be, try to enhance those other senses. So if someone was visually impaired, you'd want something scented. And I know most plants don't bloom all year long or all season long, but have something so that if they walked into a garden and they were not able to see it, they could hear over here on the far left, I've got some wind chimes. On the far upper right over there, I've got a water feature. Down here, I've got a very strongly scented plant, maybe an herb garden right here. And for touch, try not to plant things that would make you irritate your skin or make you break out or that would poke you. If it comes down to where you can't see very well, maybe something like roses are not the best choice anymore if you really need to get in there and you're going to get scratched by the thorns. Rose gardeners, you don't need to email me and tell me that I shouldn't say that. Roses are beautiful. I agree. Just be careful of things that are going to irritate and scratch you. And if you or someone you're working with or someone who you know has memory or cognitive issues, the earliest members can be the longest lasting. So, and this has come up before when I've done Master Gardener trainings with Kathy Tutt. She's from Clark County, and she's talked about cognitive issues. But when I was growing up, my mother and grandmother were phenomenal gardeners. We had huge gardens, and that was something that I helped them with. So that's one of my long memories is riding horses and gardening. So if someone has memory issues, it can really be helpful to get out there. It can help with stress or anxiety for the caregiver and the person who has their loved one who has the memory or cognitive issues. It can help with your motor skills if you get to go out and tend some plants or help with some tools. Keep gardening, but I would say just because someone maybe doesn't have the cognitive abilities they used to have, don't make them stop gardening. Keep them gardening, just be safer with it. You can build connections between people. And another thing I would really say is label everything, tools, chemicals, equipment, plants, not only for just, you can look and see clearly what that is, what I should or should not be using, but if you were to stop gardening and all these unlabeled chemicals, it's kind of difficult to dispose of those things, but just keep labels on things. Not only label what the individual things are, maybe on a shelf label, this is where the tools go, this is where the fertilizer goes, et cetera, et cetera. Just little organizational pieces like that can reduce people's stress. If you keep putting things back in the same place, they'll know where to find them, and so will you. So container gardening goes into universal design very much, not only for getting things up off the ground. If you can't kneel down and get into them, it's nice to have the space. We've got a couple on the far left here. We have a pallet garden and a shoe bag organizer garden that would not take up any ground space at all, but would take up some wall space, but really, really give you a lot of plants. I will say one thing about the pallet garden. Wooden pallets are sometimes treated with chemicals. If you have a pallet that has been treated with a chemical, please do not eat anything that comes out of that, unless you could line the little planter boxes with poly or something else so that the soil doesn't leach the chemicals out. In the middle, we have a great, I would call that a strawberry plant. No strawberries in it, but there's a lot of plants. That could be a container garden. We have a couple of window boxes. One thing I will say about window boxes, it's been really, 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 really windy here the last few weeks. So if you're going to use container gardens, make sure they're pretty heavy and are not likely to get blown around in the wind, or that you can secure them so that they don't get blown around too much. For raised beds, these can be great. I have some pictures on my next slide, but raised beds. So here we've got on the far left, we've got Jeff. He's our client that we saw in one of the first pictures, and his son with a raised bed. Jeff can still work on that garden and reach into it from the wheelchair. And then over here on the right, I believe this might have been at Hardin County's garden. They have a beautiful garden up in Kenton. But when it's higher up like that, it's easier to access, whether you're in a wheelchair, you're standing, you could, I don't know that I would want to sit on that bed, but it's nice to get them up off the ground. It's easier to get to it if you can't kneel down or get on the ground. You can use terraced gardens and retaining walls to garden in. I say raised beds should be 2.5 to 3 feet high. It depends on your height. You think of what's comfortable. With leg room and a depth of 2 to 3 feet, you should be able to reach the middle of the bed while seated or standing. So when we look here at a couple different examples, we've got on the far left a nice 3-level garden here. It's pretty wide sides. You really could sit on that. On the far right, I think that's the bed I already showed you. And then in the middle, we have these really nice beds. These are all at Hardin County. Those beds, I don't think I have the side view of them, but they're actually, the bed is actually triangle shaped, the trough is. That's for, I believe it's for drainage, but also if you can see on one side of it, there's gravel. On the other side is paved. If you were using a wheelchair, you could roll right up to that table, right up to that raised bed, and pull straight into it like it's a dining table. And you could work on that bed, you could harvest, you could tend it. When I was saying earlier, be careful about the depth. With this table, with this bed in the center, you can access it from both sides. So you want to think about, if I had that bed, if I had a raised bed and it was built up against a wall, how far out can I comfortably reach and tend plants without having to lean over to where it hurts my back, without having to reach too high where it hurts my shoulders? So don't plant anything further back than you can comfortably reach. If you were using a wheelchair mobility device, you'd have to reach across plants. So I don't know if you'd want to plant, I would want to plant my taller plants in the middle or the back, shorter ones in the front, because you're going to be reaching through them to get to the ones that are further. And then in this center picture on the very back, you can see these poles in this metal grid. I would have called that a hog panel. I'm not sure that's what that is, but it's got a lot of hanging baskets. So that's another really great vertical garden. And in the picture on the far right over here, if you can see where my, oh, darn it, my cursor is, that's the back of that wall of pots right there. You can see how they just hook on. The pots have just little hooks where they clamp onto the back of that wall. So planning for next year, I love perennials. I did not take pictures yet, but I've got a lot of daffodils and hyacinths, and I've already had, I think, crocuses, and I've got, somebody will have to remind me what these little purple ones are, but they're up right now, and they're just beautiful. I love them because they just come up. It's not a lot of effort. I like easy to care for plants, irrigation system or soaker hoses, building and storage, and always inviting people to help you in the garden. Maybe not right now in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, but it was very nice for future to invite people in. So we have a lot more resources. We have 32 Ohio Agribility fact sheets, topics under gardening with physical limitation, secondary injury prevention, heat stress, universal design on the farm. We've got handouts for stretching, gardening and equipment, and an outline of this presentation, which Leo will also send you. We also have an AgStat newsletter, Safe Tactics for Ag Today. We have a safety resource spotlight. I write an Ohio Agribility in Action column. We have injury prevention, emergency management. And then also on the handouts that I've made for today, I put in a link for the Ohio State University Extension Master Gardeners and Ohio Line, which is where you find fact sheets. And then that is it. Do we have any questions?
Thank you so much, Laura. That was wonderful. I learned several things, and I also some of the tips and tricks were particularly useful. Several people chimed in and said those are grape hyacinths.
Thank you.
So we do have 4 questions. One is, how can you mow the lawn when you have back issues?
Oh boy, that's a good one.
Tough one for me. Well, the thing that's helped me in the past is to use, if I have to use we're talking about push lawnmower, using one that has the front wheels that pull.
Yeah.
That has always
The
been
self-propelling
really good.
ones.
Yeah, self-propelling lawnmower has been good for my lower back. Any other tips that you would have for that?
I think that's a good one right there. If you had to break it into sections where you could only do some at a time. Unfortunately, that's one of those things like, I can't kneel down, so how do I weed? I've asked occupational therapists questions like that. They don't have a good answer either.
When it comes to an area that's on an incline, I figured out that it doesn't matter if I pull the lawnmower back or push it up. That's equally as painful. What I try to do is like go sideways.
Go sideways.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Go sideways if you can.
Right. Someone asked, where can you get raised beds already made so you will not need to bend down? I
know
just
they
did a
sell
quick
those
Google
at
search.
garden centers. I think they sell
Yeah,
it
I just did a Google search, and you can order them online. You can go to Home Depot.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they do exist. I don't know if you have a recommended place.
There's on that Garden Tools handout, I think it might be called Northern Tools. There's also an arthritis garden supply. I don't remember if that's what it's called, but there are some links on that one. But honestly, I mean, I've Googled them and seen them at Target and other places. And you can make anything.
Yeah, someone says hire a neighborhood kid. And if you have to sign off, thank you so much for joining us. Please watch out for the email that I'm going to send that contains handouts as well as a link to a survey. Please take a moment to provide feedback. A couple more questions that have come in. Does the work seat have a weight limit?
It would have to say on there. It would depend on the work seat.
Okay.
I would check that. On Amazon, it'll list things like that.
The glove, the grippy glove, can be used as a preventative tool for future problems too, ? I would think so.
You'd think so. I mean, if you're not gripping it, I don't know how much prevention it's going to give you, but if you're not gripping as hard, that's a question for an orthopedist or a rheumatologist. But I would say if you're not putting all that extra strain on it, I think it would be helpful. You can get them in right or left. They sell single gloves, but they come in right or left.
Yeah, I've had carpal tunnel surgery on both hands. I can imagine how that could help prevent development of repetitive strain injury or carpal tunnel syndrome.
And just trying to, I've had friends who are hairstylists who get carpal tunnel because of the constant, I mean, there's really nothing they can do, but trying to switch out what you're doing, try to switch from something that needs a lot of pruning or a lot of delicate hand work to something else.
Someone says, I'm a recent Master Gardener grad. Do you work alongside any of the community gardens in or around the Columbus area?
I do not, but actually this summer, pandemic willing, we have put together a garden ability curriculum. It's not part of your basic, it's not part of your initial Master Gardener curriculum. It'll be continuing education. I don't know if that's exactly what we're calling it or not, but Pam Bennett will send out information about that. But called Gardenability, and it's basically what we just did and then some. And we're going to teach you proper techniques, and then you're going to go teach people, which will be great.
Final question is, I find hoses to be very heavy and hard to move around the yard. We have quite a ways to go from house to garden. Recommendations?
You said hoses?
Hoses, yes.
I like those bungee hoses. If you've
So
ever
those
tried
ones
them,
that collapse and expand.
they're collapsible. I
Yeah.
love those. We have one of the really heavy ones, and it's on a cart, and my husband won't get rid of it. Although I never use it. I have a couple bungee hoses. I'll link them together. Get a good one. I got a cheap one once and was trying to, hold it together to keep it from spraying. It just blew up in my face, which was actually because it was really, really hot that day. My husband thought it was hilarious. Threw that one away, but you get a nice one. Those things are fantastic. And I've gotten some really, really long ones.
Yeah, I have been furious at times with the regular hoses, and when they get older and they get rigid, and you're trying to like coil them
Or they
up,
get a kink in them or something. Oh yeah, I hate those.
I'm like swearing at them. Just
Yes.
look at your handout. Oh yes, you have in the handout that has the products that you've recommended. You have the expandable garden hose for $25 at Amazon. So I've mentioned it a couple times. One of the handouts that I'm going to send to participants includes photos of the products that were recommended in Laura's presentation, as well as a link to where you can buy them, as well as the price.
That price was good as of, I think, earlier this winter. No guarantees on price. I get nothing for any of those. I don't endorse any of them. I just like to have an example. And a couple of people have asked me for prices, so those are price range. But I will endorse going to your local garden store. Oakland Nursery is my local store. I love it, and I can't wait till I can get back in there.
Well, I know that in Ohio, garden stores, I mean, I don't know if it's changed, but garden stores have been allowed to stay open.
Yeah. I actually need to
Actually,
put an order for some
Oakland Nursery has been doing deliveries and curbside pickups.
Oh, that's great, because I feel like gardening is, for many people, going to be a way to cope and stay sane.
Yeah, if you go on their website, they have a list of what's available.
That's great. And then I assume Lowe's and Home Depot, because they support contractors, are going to remain open.
I think
Just
they're
practice
open too,
social
yeah.
distancing and wear a mask or a bandana if you can, gloves. But I would like to start a small vegetable garden myself. But I've been trying to figure out, do I go to the garden center? How do I do this?
I know.
So for those of you who are asking about the handouts, if you received an email within the past 24 hours, which is something that I sent to remind folks of the webinar, if you received that, then I have your email address, and that is what I'm going to use to email the feedback survey along with the handouts. I can check Family Mediator 33 if your email address is on there. Any other questions? Well, if you have questions that you would like to ask directly, Laura, would you mind typing in your email address in the chat box?
Yes.
I'll also make sure that her contact information is in the email that I send. I'm looking forward to collaborating with Laura on additional programming related to accessibility issues.
I don't know if it's going to, it says all panelists. I don't know if it's going
So
to.
click it to,
This handouts out.
you
My
can,
email is on those.
okay, all right. Yeah,
And
you
also-
can select all panelists and attendees.
Yeah, I'm trying. Oh, I have all panelists. I don't know if it's working or not. At least one time. It's my last name is spelled AK German. That's the easiest way to remember it. akgerman.4. I'm the only Ackerman there. My in-laws and husband are numbers 1 through 3, and none of them are at the university anymore. So.
All right, and I'm just jotting down things. We'll just hang on to here for another couple minutes. We still have quite a few people in the room. If you don't mind it, unless you have to run off, Laura.
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
Yeah, that grippy glove it's a really cool tool. It's a very cool glove.
Yes, if for some reason you did not receive an email from me last night or this morning reminding you of the webinar, just jot your email address here in the chat box, and I'll make sure that you get the handouts. Okay, Rhonda, I'll make sure you receive the handouts. If you have your hand raised, I just allowed you to speak. I think that means you may be able to unmute yourself.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, I've got a question.
Yes.
I had a knee replacement last summer and I absolutely cannot kneel to plant seeds, pull weeds. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, what I have seen is either a DIY, like a piece of PVC tube for planting seeds, put it down on the ground, drop your seed in. It's not ideal. I've seen that used. Longer handled tools. If you can sit, I know it's not the same as being able to get into the ground, but if you have a little bench or something, you can sit and have a longer handled tool and work. Because this is a question that I've asked occupational therapists and physical therapists a few times because I have trouble kneeling also. I think it's probably years of horseback riding. But I usually sit on the ground, but then I have to make sure that you know how you're going to get back up if you sit down. And people always laugh at me, but I said, no, think about it. You sit down and you're just, oh crap, now how do I get up? So how to plan back up, whether it's a person or some sturdy object that you can pull yourself up on. I think on the handout that I had, let me see if I can just pull that handout up that I keep talking about. There's a kneeling bench, and it's a bench, and on one way you sit on it, and it's got longer legs. Then you can flip it and you can kneel on it, which I don't think that would work for you, but I always tell people, make sure you have the upper body strength to push yourself up. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer for you, Kathy, because thank you. There it is. Did I do that or did you, Leo?
I did that.
The kneeling bench right in the center. And then she flips it and she kneels on it, but that's still not going to help. I don't know if it would be helpful to sit on it or not. I would say raised beds are a good option. And then if you can see down here under guard.com, they have one. And then I've seen them, I've just Googled them and found them, and you can, I mean, I've seen old dressers made into raised beds. I don't think they would last terribly long. But I would also think about something like that shoe bag or some kind of a vertical garden where you can have it in front of you depending on what you're growing.
Right.
Okay.
So it might not be so much how do I get down to the ground as how do I pick things up and get them to a comfortable place for me.
Right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Josephine, I'll make sure you get the handouts. We still have a few people in the room, and I don't have to rush off. So, anyone,
It's nice to see people too, even with this
if,
kind of.
Josephine, if you have a question, I just allowed you to unmute yourself.
We've got some PVC pipe.
Hi, Josephine, I can hear you. Do you have a question?
You can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, no, it's just about the handouts because I think I forgot to register. So I wasn't sure if I was in that mailing list. So but you already said you will send them to me. So thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, you're welcome.
you.
Glad you could join us.
And I did come in late because I was on another one. So if this is recorded, where would I get the recording from?
I can send the link to the recording once it's available, so I'll wait. Usually it takes just a short while after the webinar ends, but I can send that link to you as well with the handouts and the feedback survey.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, you're welcome.
Leo,
Thank both
can
of
you
you. It
send
was
it?
great.
Thank you. Leo, can you send that to me also? I want to post it on our website.
Sure.
On the AgriBuilding website.
Absolutely.
Always good to have those kind of things up.
Yes. Let's see. All right. Well, since there are no more questions, I think we can sign off. So I'm going to stop recording.